In this video, we are going to cover the 2 or 3 main uses of apostrophes and where they come up most often on the ACT test, so let's get into it. The first case we'll look at, and the one that comes up the most on the ACT, is using apostrophes with possessives. So possessives, that's just a word for someone or something is owning or possessing something. So if it's my car, it would be Andrew's car, or if it was the turtle's carapace or something like that. So it's pretty straightforward. If we first look at singular nouns, so that would be a noun like person or woman or man, camera or TV, or even something like family or party. All of those technically are one unit. You may have more than one person comprising a family or a party, but you still refer to the family or the party as one singular unit. So all of those singular nouns, if they are possessing or owning something, you're always going to have apostrophe S. So if the lamp has a light bulb, if the lamp owns a light bulb, it is the lamp's light bulb. Similarly, if a family owns a dog, it is the family's dog. Bob's boat. If Jane owns some bills, they're Jane's bills. This is something you see less often. It's if you have like a week's worth or a year's worth of, that's always going to be apostrophe S. You can kind of think about it as like the year owning the worth. If you make a certain amount of money in a year, it would be a year's worth of money. So the year would kind of own the money, I guess. But that's always going to be apostrophe S and then a song's melody. Now, if this is a little bit abstract, something you can apply that's a little bit easier on the ACT is if you can replace the singular noun with one of these pronouns, it's, his, or her. Most of the time that'll tell you if you need that apostrophe S. So if we replace the lamp's light bulb with its light bulb, that makes sense, or his boat, or her bills, or its melody. It's a little bit tougher here because you would think of a family as saying like the family's dog is their dog, but since this is a singular noun, I guess it would be its dog because the family is one single unit. But most of the time, if you can replace it with its, his, or her, that'll tell you if it's a singular noun and therefore an apostrophe S. All right, before we get into our first example, one thing I'd like to add. So we said apostrophes can be used with possessives, but they can also be used to indicate that you have more than one of something or to indicate a plural. But very rarely can you use an apostrophe in this way. The only two ways you can use it to do that is if you're talking about a number or a letter in the alphabet. So like a specific digit or digits or a number, a letter in the alphabet, sorry. So if I said count to 49, count by sevens. 7 apostrophe S would indicate that you have more than one 7. But you only use this when you have the digit 7, because if you didn't have that apostrophe there, a 7 and an S next to it would look like 7 was a coefficient or something. But saying sevens, pluralizing the digit 7, you do need the apostrophe. The other way is if, say I consistently got the grade of B in all of my classes, I would say I got straight B's. B apostrophe S. More than one B in this case. To pluralize it, you would use the apostrophe. Now, these are the only two cases that you can. So when they use it in here, like this says controversial advocates. Advocates is a plural of advocate, but they put an apostrophe where it wasn't necessary to have one. To make anything else plural, besides these two cases, you just slap an S on the end or an ES or something. But you just put an S on the end most of the time, and that just makes it plural. You don't need an apostrophe before the S, or here it actually has it after the S. Both of those, if you ever see those on the ACT, just cross those out right away. Now if we look at number 66, strictly in context of the possessive, using the apostrophe with possessives, what do we have now? So we said, the sentence says, Jones, however, became one of the movement's most powerful and controversial advocates. Try and ignore that apostrophe with advocates. But do we need the apostrophe with movements? Does the movement possess or own something? Well, it does. If these are just descriptions or adjectives, we can kind of cross these out here. The sentence is essentially saying, Jones became one of the movement's advocates, and the movement owns the advocates. The movement is possessing the advocates, so we do need the apostrophe In this case, it'll be H. And if we use our trick of replacing it with one of those pronouns, if we say Jones became one of its advocates, one of the movement's advocates, that does make sense. So both of those reasons, the answer is H. All right, number 14, if you want to try it on your own, go ahead and pause the video. Ready, set, pause. Cool. So if I read the sentence right now, it's saying, I leave the trail and come out into the open manicured park at the trail's end. So if we replace trails with its, his, or her, what does that do? So if we replace a trail as a thing, so if we replace it with its, we would say, I leave the trail and come out into the open manicured park at its end, at the trail's end. So in this case, we would have the apostrophe because its is indicating possession of the end of the trail. The trail owns the end of the trail. It's the trail's end. So in this case, it's G. All right, switching gears from singular nouns to plural nouns. So if a singular noun was like elephant, singular, one unit. A plural noun would be elephants, more than one. Simple enough. So before, to distinguish if we had a singular noun, if you could replace the noun with the pronoun its, her, or his, that would tell you that you had a singular noun. Similarly with plural nouns, if you can replace it with the pronoun their, that's how you discern if you have a plural noun. So we have a couple of cases, but the first one that we'll look at are plural nouns that end in S, which is most plural nouns. So lamp, the plural of lamp, you just smack an S on the end, or in our case of elephant. If you have more than one elephant, you have elephants. Just sticking an S on the end to make it plural, that's the case that we're focusing on now. If you're indicating possession of something with a plural noun, instead of an apostrophe S, you have S apostrophe. So, singular nouns, we had an apostrophe S. If I said a singular elephant owned a ball, it would be the elephant's ball. Elephant apostrophe S, ball. If I say a family of 10 elephants owned a ball, it would be the elephant's ball. Elephant's apostrophe ball. It would be their ball. So if we look at a couple of sentences, if I have a 4-wall room, for example, and the room's walls are covered in paintings, I would say the wall's paintings as in their paintings. So we have more than one wall owning the paintings. There's 4 walls that are owning the paintings. So it's the wall's paintings. It's their paintings. Versus if you had a singular wall and you had maybe like 2 paintings on one wall, it would be the wall's paintings. It would be its paintings versus their paintings with more than one wall. A couple more. Elephant's ball, like we said, if you have more than one elephant owning a ball, maybe they're sharing it for some reason, it would be their ball. And if it is a bunch of boys owning a locker room, it would be the boys' locker room, as in their locker room. Boys, apostrophe, locker room. So that's with plural nouns that end in S, which is most plural nouns, like calculators, paintings, skis, clocks, anything like that you just stick an S on the end to indicate ownership. With those, you have S apostrophe. Easy enough. Now if you have plural nouns that don't end in S, instead of doing S apostrophe, you have the similar thing to the singular by using the apostrophe S. So, things that don't end in S when making them plural would be like boxes or oxen, or if you say woman as a singular woman versus women as more than one woman, all of those, you don't put an S on the end, you put an ES or an EN or not even an S. So, if we look at these, we have the boxes shipping numbers. So if I have a room full of 200 boxes and they all have shipping numbers, it would be their shipping numbers. It would be the boxes shipping numbers. Boxes, the plural of boxes is B-O-X-E-S and not B-O-X-S. So we have apostrophe S in this case instead of boxes apostrophe, which would look kind of weird if you just had B-O-X-S apostrophe. But another example we have are women's clothes. Their clothes. If you have more than one woman having clothes, it would be women's clothes, apostrophe S. And men's locker room. So we had boys, more than one boy owning a locker room. We had a boys' locker room, boys apostrophe. Men owning a locker room, it would be men apostrophe S locker room. Simply because the plural of boy is boys and the plural of man is men. You don't have the S on the end for men, So that's why it's apostrophe S. On the ACT, most of the time this isn't going to come up. What actually gets tested is distinguishing between whether you have a plural noun or a singular noun. And it's a little bit trickier than you think. If we look at a couple sentences down here, you have to rely on context clues to tell you whether you're talking about a plural noun or a singular noun. So sometimes you're going to have to look through the passage to give you the answer. For example, what we have here are two sentences, the difference being garden apostrophe S or gardens apostrophe. So we use an apostrophe S if we're talking about a singular noun, and we use S apostrophe if we're talking about a plural noun that ends in S. So they planted a garden. The garden's bushes were 5 feet tall. Keyword here is a garden. We're talking about a singular garden. So when we say the garden possesses something, the garden is owning the bushes. It's the garden apostrophe S bushes, the garden's bushes, or its bushes. So we're talking about one thing. In contrast, if we go over here, they planted 8 gardens. So this is more than one garden, aka a plural noun. We would say the garden's apostrophe bushes were 5 feet tall, or their bushes were 5 feet tall. All right, let's look at number 33, keeping in mind that whole discerning between singular and plural noun in mind. So if you want to try it on your own, go ahead and pause the video. Ready, set, pause. All right, so there's 3 answer options, B, C, and D, that have the apostrophe indicating possession. But right now it's underlined, there is no apostrophe. So it's just saying parks as in more than one park. But it says the park's beauty. So it's saying the beauty is possessed by the parks or the park. But we can see that there's some sort of possession going on, so we can safely eliminate A. Now the trouble comes where do we put that apostrophe? Is it a singular park, it's its beauty, the one park's beauty, its beauty, or is it 3 parks, their beauty, the park's apostrophe beauty? Well, we have to rely on context clues to figure this out, because if we replace this with its or their, its beauty and their beauty, that works for both of them. So if we start at where 32 is underlined, I think it's supposed to be it instead of they. So if it says, it ripped a channel through Johnson's Shut-ins, one of Missouri's most popular state parks. We can see that it's just one state park. It's this one. Whatever Johnson's Shut-ins is, we don't have to know what that is, but we know that it's talking about that specific singular park. So we can safely eliminate C now, since it's not talking about more than one park. Now, where does the comma go? So, do we need the comma or do we not? If we read it right now with the comma, though flood damage marred the park's beauty for a time, the scar the raging water left. And then it goes on. But if we look at this introductory clause here, we do want that comma because, it's kind of one of those dependent clause situations where you're starting the sentence with an introduction and then having the actual independent clause come afterwards. So if we keep that comma and we put the park apostrophe S, singular park, that will be answer option B. All right, 58, before we look at it, so there's a page here and a page here and then a weird page break right there. The only thing on the second page was in a nest. So I just put that up here on this first page. That's why that's there. I'm not adding to the ACT. Anyway, 58 was the hardest apostrophe question that I could find. If you want to try it on your own and give it a shot, then go ahead. Ready, set, pause. Cool. So what I kind of tried to do when I was figuring this one out was weighing all of the answer options and kind of doing a process of elimination. So the one that sticks out to me the most is J. It has an apostrophe with eggs, indicating that there's some form of possession happening with the eggs, versus F, G, and H are just saying eggs in the sense that you have more than one egg. So what's happening in our phrase right here? We say like birds' eggs. Well, it's pretty clear that in this example, eggs is just being used as a plural of the singular egg. So I don't think we need any possession here, so I think we can get rid of J. But in a similar vein, letter H doesn't have an apostrophe, whereas F and G do. So is the bird or birds, is that having possession at all or not? Well, if we see this, it's saying like birds' eggs. And I think it's kind of clear that the bird or birds are possessing in some way, shape, or form the eggs, the plural eggs. So we need an apostrophe, but where does it go? This is where the hard part comes in. So normally I would say look at the passage for context. But if we read the passage, it says, I even saw the trapezium star cluster, illuminated by 4 bright young stars nestled in the nebula like birds' eggs in a nest. This like birds' eggs in a nest, that's just a simile. That's just comparing the 4 bright young stars to birds' eggs in a nest. So I don't think we can really rely on the rest of the sentence giving us any context clues, because this birds' eggs in a nest kind of just came out of nowhere. But there is some stuff we can do. So if we cross out everything leading up to this underlined passage, or birds' eggs in a nest, if we cross out everything before that, for a moment, entertain the idea that we would pick answer option G. If we were to pick G and say it was one singular bird owning multiple eggs versus multiple birds owning multiple eggs, if we were to entertain the idea that it was one bird owning all the eggs and we said birds' eggs in a nest, to me that sounds like I'm saying someone's name is Bird. Like I'm saying Charlie Parker's eggs in a nest, or John's eggs in a nest, like a proper noun. Someone's eggs in a nest versus bird's eggs in a nest. Who is Bird? I think the sense that is being used here is Bird as an animal and not Charlie Parker. So if we did Bird as an animal, it was the bird's eggs. I think we would need the lowercase letter a before it. Like you wouldn't say turtle's shell talking about a singular turtle owning a shell, or elephant's ball talking about an elephant owning a ball. You wouldn't do that. You would normally say a turtle's shell, an elephant's ball, a bird's eggs in a nest. So that's kind of my reasoning behind this. Like if you take this away, it's not like we were changing anything fundamental to the sentence. Like reading this, let's put in the lowercase a before birds and read the whole sentence. I even saw the trapezium star cluster, illuminated by 4 bright young stars, nestled in the nebula like a bird's eggs in a nest. Sure, that makes sense. We're talking about a bird, the animal bird, a bird owning some eggs, and the bird's eggs in a nest. But we don't have an A. We just have birds' eggs in a nest. So I think we are talking about multiple birds in this situation, right? So we kind of had to do some reasoning there. You couldn't really substitute its or their and expect that to work, because if we said its eggs or their eggs, both of those are of equal grammatical value. I don't think that really helps a lot, but we don't have the letter A before bird's eggs. And when I just say bird's eggs in the sense that we have a singular bird owning the eggs, bird's eggs sounds like I'm saying someone's name or a proper noun, versus their eggs, multiple birds owning multiple eggs, like we have in answer option F. Now if I read it, as multiple birds owning the eggs, no change, illuminated by 4 bright young stars nestled in the nebula like birds' eggs in a nest. Multiple birds owning the eggs, and the eggs are in a nest. I think that's what we're going to go for here, because G sounds a little bit weird. So that was the bulk of the video. We saw that apostrophes are mostly tested on in terms of possessives, and distinguishing between whether it's a singular or a plural noun possessing something. And the other sense that we saw is that apostrophes can be used to make things plural, but very rarely. And finally, contraction. So I'll just skim over this real quick. Contraction is a joining of 2 words. Most often on the ACT, they test you with contractions and homophones, or words that sound the same. Like we saw last video, its versus its. If you just replace the contraction, which is a joining of 2 words, with the decomposition of both of its words, as in just take the contraction apart, if it still makes sense, then you choose the contraction. If it doesn't, then don't choose the contraction. It's a very easy rule to apply. So replace its with it is, or whose with who is, to distinguish between its or its and whose or whose. Thanks for watching. This was Apostrophes. They don't come up as often as stuff like comma rules, but they come up often enough that you would be missing out if you didn't know any of this. But stay tuned for the next video, and I'll see you then.